I had never struggled so much up to this point to carry out everyday tasks.
Marzia leaving YouTube has opened a huge discussion around mental health and self-care. She shares a lot of worrying thoughts with us. She felt like she didn't earn her fame.
I felt like I was a fraud. I definitely didn't deserve all the attention. I just happened to know someone that did. It's about me needing to find my path, because for a long time I felt like I was following someone else's.
She started feeling burnt out, losing motivation to film videos.
Especially this year, I struggled with finding a reason to keep going.
And she became more involved in her YouTube life rather than her real life.
I had never struggled so much up to this point to carry out everyday tasks. I just didn't want to leave the house. I remember relying so much on Felix, and it made me feel very guilty. And I kept thinking, like, what was off about me? What was wrong? Everything was pretty much good in my life. I just couldn't figure it out. After a few months, I realized that it was because I had allowed myself to be completely cut off from the world. I wasn't seeking any friendships, and I was just finding comfort in my own little bubble on YouTube.
Many people are drawing conclusions from these statements, believing she's depressed or going through an existential crisis. I can't say whether or not those theories are true, but I do believe she's in a better place now. Marzia said she reached out to friends and became much happier.
I took control over my life. I started reaching out to people, and luckily a lot of people started reaching out to me. In just a few months, I completely turned things around, and I realized how it was such a state of mind. I was putting myself down and thinking that I couldn't do it, that I couldn't meet new people, that I just couldn't be social. When really, if you take small steps, you can definitely make some progress. I think a lot of the people that are in my life right now don't even realize the major impact that they had on my well-being, my confidence, my happiness.
Now she's working on finding her own path, which doesn't necessarily translate to having an existential crisis. She simply recognized that her job was no longer satisfying, and it encouraged unhealthy behavior, constantly being behind the computer instead of having real-life connections. I know a lot of fans are upset that Marzia left and deleted or privated the majority of her videos, but it's for her own good. Marzia said in her last blog post, "I had to end my journey on YouTube and take back some of my private space," which I have to emphasize. Private space is incredibly important. When we're constantly posting about our relationships and vlogging our daily life, we tend to exaggerate what really happened or only capture what we think people will like, and we end up living our relationships on social media. Instead of enjoying quality time with friends and family, we're recording it to entertain others. Even if it's not intentional, even if we genuinely want to share a touching moment with others, we still seek a response from our followers. Dana Julian, a Los Angeles therapist, says, "One of the hardest things about managing life as a YouTube star is making a career out of something that can be an addiction. Social media can become addictive because it stimulates the reward molecule, dopamine."
Dopamine is a brain chemical. It was first discovered in 1958 by some Swedish researchers. And dopamine is involved in all kinds of things: our mood regulation, sleep, motion, attention. More recent research by Kent Barrett and Robert Sapolsky, among others, has shown that it is not so much that dopamine gets released when you have a pleasurable experience, but in anticipation of a reward or a pleasurable experience. So, what does this have to do with your smartphone? Well, what happens is you feel the urge to look at something. That's that motion, that's that motivation, that curiosity, and that is likely fueled by a short dopamine release.
So, what does this have to do with Marzia's YouTube career? The social media dopamine high makes you prioritize the wrong things. As entrepreneur and certified YouTube consultant Tim Schmoyer says, YouTube really starts to suck you in a way that eventually all of your real-life relationships are kind of placed on a back burner because you need to keep feeding this machine of people, these fans, this praise, all the stuff that you've been working on online and the thing that you're trying to create and build. And then after you've kind of gotten there, or even if you haven't gotten there, you're just focused on it for a really long time, the real-life relationships are kind of gone and they're not as strong. And you might think, fans are friends too. But I'm sorry to say that's not entirely true.
There's a thing that social scientists call parasocial relationships, which is when one party knows a great deal about this party, the celebrity, but this party, the celebrity, actually knows very little about the individuals in this party. It takes a lot of humility, a lot of maturity, and a lot of self-awareness to be able to avoid some of the negative issues that come up in this type of relationship. I hear a lot of fans and a lot of YouTube creators both say to each other, I love you, you're awesome, you're amazing, and in one sense that's true, like you do actually love each other, but in another sense that's not really true at all. Because fans don't really know you, and you don't really know your fans. Both parties just really like the feeling that the other provides for them, but you really don't know each other.
And on top of that, R.I.M. Dunbar, a psychology professor at the University of Oxford, says we can really only handle about 150 friends, including family members. Dunbar explains, within the 150 limit, we have inner circles or layers that require a certain amount of regular interaction to maintain the friendship. He says we need to interact at least once a week for the inner core of 5 intimates, once a month for the next layer of 15 best friends, and once a year for the main layer of 150 just friends. Otherwise, they start slipping down the layer, with the exception of family members who require less constant interaction. So, when your time is overly consumed by social media, you simply aren't able to give the attention needed to maintain real relationships. Dunbar further explains that having more than 150 friends or followers is a meaningless number. He says, we're fooling ourselves. You can certainly sign up as many people as you like, but that doesn't make them friends. All we are doing is signing up people that we would normally think of as acquaintances in the offline world. To reiterate, the number of followers you have doesn't matter. What matters is, you absolutely must have legitimate real-life relationships. Tim Schmoyer explains that you need these types of relationships because they are people who know you, who you are opening your life to, people that you trust, people who will love you, even if all the YouTube stuff was gone, even if all fame, the popularity, the money, whatever, even if that was all gone, these are people who will stick with you. These are the relationships that you don't have online. These aren't just like people that you call and talk to on the phone. These are people in your actual town, in your neighborhood, in your community that you can meet with face to face and have those deep personal relationships. And I think Marzia realized this when she left YouTube. It's an incredible step forward. I do have to acknowledge that social media does have some positive effects. I'm not implying that you should completely disconnect. What I'm saying is, we just have to be conscious of when our media consumption starts to negatively impact our lives.
I think it's great how people can relate to others online. I grew so much more confident because of it, but if you allow it to take over your life, I think it's not healthy.
If you find yourself addicted to social media, don't worry. Dr. Susan Weinshank has a solution.
So what can you do about this? Is there anything that you can do if you don't want to get caught in a dopamine reward-seeking loop? You might say, well, I just won't start. I won't open Instagram and then it won't happen. Well, that's true, but probably I'm willing to bet you're going to open it out of habit, if nothing else, because of that conditioned response. So once you're in it, if at any point you realize you're in it, at some point you're going to realize what you need to do is have a counter movement. Because see, you've got this muscle memory movement of the scroll with your finger or your thumb, and that's what's keeping the conditioned response going. What's your counter move? You need a physical counter movement that turns it off. I'll tell you what mine is. It's very simple. So when I'm, glued to my screen and I'm scrolling with my thumb or my finger, and I realize, I've been doing this for a while, I very quickly, without thinking about it, I will press the home button really fast and take the phone and turn it upside down and put it on the table. And I'll, back away. So I have these movements. It's press the home button, turn the phone over, put it down. And that's my counter movement, that I actually now have a conditioned response to that movement. And when I do that, that stops the dopamine reward loop. You want to think of a physical movement that you do whenever you realize you're in a loop. That'll help counteract the loop.
What do you think about social media's impact on relationships? Let me know what you think in the comments below.
How do you get from connection to isolation? You end up isolated if you don't cultivate the capacity for solitude, the ability to be separate, to gather yourself. Solitude is where you find yourself so that you can reach out to other people and form real attachments. When we don't have the capacity for solitude, we turn to other people in order to feel less anxious or in order to feel alive. When this happens, we're not able to appreciate who they are. It's as though we're using them as spare parts to support our fragile sense of self. We slip into thinking that always being connected is going to make us feel less alone. But we're at risk, because actually it's the opposite that's true. If we're not able to be alone, we're going to be more lonely. And if we don't teach our children to be alone, they're only going to know how to be lonely. We're smitten with technology, and we're afraid, like young lovers, that too much talking might spoil the romance. But it's time to talk. We grew up with digital technology, and so we see it as all grown up. But it's not. It's early days. There's plenty of time for us to reconsider how we use it, how we build it. I'm not suggesting that we turn away from our devices, just that we develop a more self-aware relationship with them, with each other, and with ourselves.